Hey everyone, it's Dorothy with crazyforcrust.com and welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to talk to you all about pizza crust. Pizza is one of our favorite meals and I'm absolutely making my own homemade crust. So I'm going to show you all my tips and tricks today with my ultimate pizza dough recipe. Okay, so I know that a lot of you might be kind of afraid of making your own pizza dough because that means you need to work with yeast. Now, raise your hand if you're scared of working with yeast. I used to be. Before I started blogging, I was absolutely terrified of working with yeast. I was worried that I would kill it, or that it was already dead, or that it wouldn't activate, or that my bread would be tough. But once I started working with it, I realized how absolutely easy it is to make your own bread, your own rolls, and your own pizza crust. There are two kinds of yeast that you're gonna see at the grocery store, and you can make this pizza dough recipe with either one of them. I'm gonna show you how to do it with both because both methods are a little bit different depending on what kind of yeast you buy. The first one, the one that I've always used up until recently, is Active Dry Yeast. And this is Fleischmann's brand. The Active Dry is in red. It's called Active Dry Yeast Original Yeast. And this is what I've always used up until just recently when I discovered the other kind of yeast, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But Active Dry Yeast is the one that's most all-purpose. You'll find it in every grocery store. When you're using Active Dry Yeast, you have to proof your yeast. So before you start making your recipe, you need to wake it up because yeast is kind of these little living things and they need to wake up and ferment and get all bubbly before you're able to start making your dough. So we're gonna start by doing that with this Active Dry Yeast. I have my cup of water here that I'm gonna start with. Now I need to heat this up to between 100 and 110 degrees. And you can see on the Active Dry Yeast packet, on the back, it says 100 to 110 degrees. So how do you know it's 100 to 110 degrees? Well, hot water, when you touch it, it's gonna be hot to the touch. But what I love doing, if you're gonna be making anything with yeast on a regular basis or anything at all that requires a thermometer, I highly recommend you getting one of these instant read thermometers. You can buy them on Amazon. They're not expensive. I think this was $20. And it's an instant read. So if I put this thermometer right now into this water, it instantly tells me that the water is 66 degrees. So I need to heat it up a little bit. So I'm gonna heat it in the microwave for about 30 seconds to a minute, depends on a lot of factors, but that's about your ballpark. 45 seconds to a minute and 15 will be about how long you need to heat your water. To the hot water, I'm gonna add my yeast, just one packet of Active Dry Yeast. Make sure to get all the little buggers out of that envelope. About 2 1/4 teaspoons if you're using a jar. And then you're gonna add a teaspoon of sugar. And the sugar helps activate the yeast. I'm going to stir that together. Stir that together, and we're going to let it sit until it's nice and bubbly. And in the meantime, we're going to get our dry ingredients and our oil ready for the proofed yeast. Okay, so we're going to start with 3 cups of all-purpose flour. I always use 3 cups in this recipe. So I just add all 3 cups. Now I'm using a stand mixer that is fitted with a dough hook. Now if you don't have a stand mixer, you can do this by hand. It's going to take a little bit more kneading time. Won't need to knead it as much if I'm using a stand mixer. But again, if you're doing this by hand, just stir it until you can't anymore and then get your hands in there. I just have a stand mixer, so it's easier for me to use that. Now this recipe is not suitable for using in a bread machine, just FYI. It's a totally different recipe. Okay, so we have our flour. I'm gonna add a teaspoon of salt. I'm using kosher salt, but you can use regular, to the flour. And then we're going to use 3 tablespoons of olive oil. You can use vegetable oil if you want to, but I love the flavor that olive oil adds to my pizza dough. So that's 1, 2, 3. Now you can kind of see that the yeast is starting to bubble. You're gonna give it a couple more minutes. That's what Active Dry, you have to wake it up before you can use it. So While that is bubbling or starting to bubble, I'm going to start mixing up the oil, salt, and flour. Okay, it's just kind of incorporated. It's gonna incorporate more once we add the liquid. You can smell it. It smells very yeasty. It's almost there. It's nice and starting to bubble. That means the yeast is waking up and it's ready to make our pizza dough rise. Yeast is nice and bubbly now. It's all thick and very yeasty. So we're gonna pour it into our dry ingredients and the oil. Pour that in, and then we're simply going to turn on the machine and let it run. All come together in a big ball. It's almost there. It'll kind of clean the sides of the bowl off. It's kneading it all for you, so we don't have to knead this at all. And there it is. This is our pizza dough. So when you're using active dry yeast, you have to let the dough rise. It's gonna be at least an hour for it to double in size. If you wanna do it a little faster, if you have your oven running, you can put it near the oven where they're giving off a little bit more heat. It'll go a little faster, especially if it's cold in your house. So take a large bowl and spray it with nonstick cooking spray. Place your ball of dough inside. I like to spray it again with cooking spray so that the plastic doesn't stick. And then we're going to cover this with plastic wrap. So it makes a nice seal on there. Just like so. And we're gonna put this off to the side and let it sit until it rises, about an hour. And then we'll be ready for pizza crust. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about the other kind of yeast that you find at the grocery store. And this is my new favorite kind of yeast, my new favorite way of making pizza dough or bread or baking with yeast. It's using rapid rise yeast, and that's the Fleischmann's one. Other yeast companies have other like fast rising yeast. I'm gonna use rapid rise today, and that means you don't have to wait for it to rise. It's rapid rise yeast, which is amazing when you forget to make your pizza crust, like with this method on Friday night. If I forget to make my pizza crust and all of a sudden it's 5 o'clock and I want pizza, this can be done in under 30 minutes, so it's even better. The great thing too about using rapid rise yeast is you don't need to proof the yeast. You add all the dry ingredients together, all the wet ingredients together, and then just mix it. So we're gonna start by adding flour. I'm gonna use about 3 cups of flour, but with this method, we're gonna start by just adding 1 cup of flour into our mixing bowl. I'm gonna add my yeast, which is 1 packet of the rapid rise yeast, or some sort of fast acting yeast, a teaspoon of sugar, and a teaspoon of salt. I'm gonna save this flour because we're gonna have to add more later. All right, so now I have my water. I have a cup of water again. It's hot water, and again, I have measured it with my instant read thermometer, and it's between 120 and 130, which is what we want for rapid rise yeast. Again, this instant read thermometer is perfect for working with yeast or even for meat or anything like that. It's hot to the touch. It's warm to the touch if you don't have a thermometer. And so now I'm going to add the oil to this. 3 tablespoons of oil to the hot water. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now I'm going to simply mix the wet ingredients into the dry. I'm going to start the mixer on stir. And again, you can do this by hand with a wooden spoon and then just get in there and knead it once you're finished. Either way works. And I'm going to add my hot ingredient, water and oil. That up a little bit, just let it go until it combines. Scrape down the side just to make sure all the wet ingredients get incorporated with the dry. We're going to start it off by stirring it or low speed. And then I'm going to add another cup of flour. Make sure not to pack your flour. So now we're at 2 cups of flour. Go slow so you don't wear it. I'm going to scrape the sides of the bowl just to make sure it all gets incorporated. All right, now I'm going to add not quite a full cup, probably about 1/2 to 3/4 of a cup of flour. Because we are going to need this a little bit with flour, so we don't want to have too much in there. Okay, so it's mostly together, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly flour this cutting board, and I'm going to turn out my pizza crust. Again, this is the Rapid Rise Yeast Pizza Crust. Okay. Now it's not quite together yet, so I'm going to knead this one a little bit. Just until it comes together and is elastic and smooth. Make sure that you keep some flour underneath it so it doesn't stick to your cutting board. Kneading, I actually thought that I would think that kneading was the most boring thing, but I actually love it. It's kind of therapeutic, just kind of pounding it, moving it back and forth. Makes me feel like I'm a real cook or something. Okay, and once you have your ball of pizza dough, just like so, if you push on it, it'll bounce back. And now, the beauty with the Rapid Rise yeast is we just have to let it rest for 10 minutes. So it's way faster. Over here, we're still waiting for that to rise. Haven't noticed any difference yet. It's probably going to be another 45 minutes before we can make that pizza. This one, we're going to wait about 10 minutes, and then we're going to make the pizza. So what we're going to do is while it's resting, I'm going to cover it with a clean kitchen towel. Let it rest for 10 minutes, and then we'll get to pizza making. I'm going to clean up. See you in 10. Welcome back. It's been about 10 minutes and we're almost ready to roll out our pizza dough that we made with Rapid Rise yeast. The one that we made with Active Dry is still sitting over here, fluffing up, rising if you will. So let's talk about pizza for a minute. First of all, this is just a pizza dough recipe. You can make any kind of pizza you want with this. You can make breadsticks, you can make thick or thin crust pizza. There are so many different ways that you can use this dough. It's kind of an all-purpose pizza dough. If you want to make this whole wheat, you can definitely make this whole wheat. I like to use 1/2 and 1/2 whole wheat flour and white flour, or you can use 100% white whole wheat flour. Don't use 100% whole wheat. It changes the ratios a little bit. You can use gluten-free 1-to-1 all-purpose flour. It's not going to rise. You don't need to wait for it to rise because it can't rise if it doesn't have that gluten that's in the flour. But you can definitely use that to make a gluten-free crust as well. So I have my pizza dough here. It's been 10 minutes. It's all my Rapid Rise pizza dough is ready to press out into a pizza and make it for dinner. You can make this one large 12-inch pizza-ish. You can cut it in half and make 2 thinner crust pizzas. I also love to divide this into about 8 pieces and make mini pizzas. I do that a lot over the summer. We grill them and have them for the kids for when Jordan has a sleepover or something like that. Just pull them out, throw them at them. Or if I ever want just a pizza, I'm home by myself for dinner or for lunch, it's really easy to do that. I like to freeze it also. All right, so tip for baking pizza. Now, I know a lot of people really want that crunchy bottom on a pizza. I cook my pizza at a really high temperature. Set your oven for 500 degrees. And then if you have a pizza pan or a pizza stone, or you can use a large cookie sheet, put it in the oven while it's preheating. You want to put this pizza onto that pan while it's hot. And that'll sizzle the bottom and make it nice and crunchy on the bottom while it stays soft while it's baking. All right, so we're gonna press this out. Now, because I have my pan already in the oven, I need to have something to roll it out onto, and so I use parchment paper. I'll usually just cook it straight on the parchment paper. It's way easier. I find it hard to transfer the ready-made pizza to the hot pizza pan without like it falling all over the place. So I just put it on parchment. I leave it on parchment. Works just fine. What I do is I just pull out my parchment paper, make it about the size that I want. Like to crinkle it up. That's my secret for parchment paper. When I'm baking with it or anything, I crumple it up because then it doesn't roll. It stays open and stays flat. So this is about what I'm aiming for my pizza. And I'm just gonna start stretching. You can use a rolling pin if you want, but I like doing it by hand. I'm just gonna stretch. It's a little sticky, but that's all right. Just means it'll be good. And I just you wanna be careful not to rip it, but you wanna make sure and get it nice and thin in the center with a little ring of crust around the edge. Or for 4 pizzas, if you're having, if you have kids and you wanna do separate pizzas for the adults or for the kids. Also roll this into like a square, like a flatbread shape, or and make appetizers. I have a caramelized onion and pesto flatbread on my site, and that's really, really good. You can also roll this out and make my cheesy ranch breadsticks with it, which are delicious. Okay, there we go. I've got my pizza crust all rolled. Oops, don't want to fold it over on itself. Got my pizza crust all rolled out. I'm just ready to top it. I'm going to throw it in and bake it, and then we're going to eat dinner. Thanks for watching today, you guys. Making your own pizza is easier than you think. You're never going to want to buy it from the store again. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure and eat something pizza-ish today.